Hello and welcome to Inside the Outside, the podcast that will take you inside the minds of two very different outdoors people. I'm Gary Kirk.
And I'm Christy Kirk. So glad you could join us for our first podcast. Let's get started by telling people what they can expect from this podcast, Gary.
All right, how about we tell them what they won't get from this podcast? If you're looking for hardcore survival skills or doomsday prepping, you might want to move on down the road. What we're going to talk about are different outdoor activities and our experiences doing them.
We'll offer insight that will hopefully help you plan your next trip outdoors. Our topics will range from real-world experiences that span experience levels of pure novice to advanced outdoor skills.
The outdoors have been a big part of my life. I honestly can't remember a time when I wasn't fishing or hiking or camping or just doing something outside. My fondest memories as a kid were coming home, jumping off the school bus, and immediately just running into the woods or grabbing my fishing pole and going fishing in the creek beside the house. That was the same way with all of my friends. That was our thing, was just as soon as you got home from school, you went out and played in the woods.
I love the outdoors too, but I think I have a slightly different relationship to the outdoors than you do. I love being out there. I love being outside. I like to have an activity, however. I don't like to just sit in nature with nothing to do. I can't handle that.
And see, for me, just being outside is activity enough. I can be perfectly happy sitting on a riverbank or hanging out in my hammock. If I'm deer hunting, I can be in a tree stand and just be in my zen place.
Now, I can read in a hammock for ages, but there's an activity there. I'm relaxing in a hammock with a book. But I like to have some action. I have a very quick attention span, and so I need something going on.
So what is it? Is it just that short attention span that makes you not want to camp?
Well, I think camping is deathly boring. I just think it's boring. I think going out into the woods with your tent with the intention of staying in one place and just being there, I do not connect to that. I love backpacking. I love, walking and I'm happy to camp if it's associated with backpacking. So walk all day, camp when you're exhausted, get up in the morning, walk again. I like camping in that situation. I don't like it if camping is the activity. I just don't have a lot of fun doing that.
Well, I do remember the first time that we talked about doing some serious camping, you told me the only way you would go is if I hiked you far enough into the woods that you would be so exhausted you wouldn't want to walk back to the car.
Yes, and that's the only way I will camp.
And since then, we've camped many times, and I will say we've always done mileage, except for maybe once down at Croatan when I persuaded you to stay in one spot. But for the biggest part, you like to have mileage. I'm perfectly content with the concept of sitting down and building a fire. Fishing, I love to camp where there's water. I'm perfectly happy camping anywhere, but if you can put me near a river, set me up, I'll camp until I just can't camp anymore. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and for me, I don't care about where I camp. I care that it's part of something bigger. It's a necessity to do something else that I do enjoy.
Recently, I've been reading The Ultimate Hiker's Gear Guide, 2nd edition by Andrew Skurka, and it's one of my favorite books. I love that he dives into a lot of the science behind certain types of gear, and it's all based on his personal experience, and this guy has done it all. For those that don't know him, he's a professional backpacker. He was named the 2007 Adventurer of the Year by National Geographic Adventurer, and the 2005 Person of the Year by Backpacker Magazine. This guy is extreme. Now, he's more extreme than I am. Just read his book and you'll probably get where I'm coming from. But he helped me learn several things about how to pack smarter and how to approach things. And one of the interesting things that I found in there is he breaks things down by whether you're a hiker or whether you're a camper. And for me, I'm definitely a camper. I think we've already established that. You are definitely not. You are a hiker.
Yeah.
And as a result, that makes you what he calls a camper by default. And that is the concept of you've hiked so far, you're not coming back. And your goal is to continue going in that straight line or in some type of a loop to where you get back to where you're going.
That's true. I'm definitely a hiker and a camper by default. And, that's what we want to do on this podcast. We want to serve campers with information and hikers and default campers like myself with information and other outdoor enthusiasts with information. There's a place for all of us to enjoy the outdoors and be a part of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the biggest key is just getting outside. There's something for everyone, even if you just want to go out like we did this morning and do a quick hike to see what's going on outside. It was we live in the South, a beautiful morning where it was kind of had a little bit of a chill, where fall just came, even though fall in the South is very different than fall where we used to live. But still, it was a nice, cool morning. Got out, hiked a little bit, saw some critters, some mushrooms, and a few other things. It was just a really good time. Didn't cost a dime. You don't have to have any special gear. I took a walking stick that a friend of mine made, but otherwise you just throw your shoes on and get out in the woods.
Yeah, I didn't take anything. Because it's a trail in our neighborhood that goes through the woods along a river, and it's 2 miles. There's no exertion. But yeah, I think that's the thing. Sometimes in a lot of different sports and activities, there's so much categorization and judgment about, oh, you're not a real this, or you're not actually doing this. And we don't have that. There are things we love and there are things we don't love about the outdoors, but there's room for everyone to enjoy at whatever level, in whatever way they can and want to.
There's so much truth in what you just said, because when you get into those sports, there's people get obsessed with having the right kind of gear and the right kind of this or that. But really, when I was a kid, I didn't think about having the right kind of gear. I just wore the shoes that I wore to school, and took off and went out in the woods. That was what it was about. It was just about getting outside. And, that is definitely the focus of this podcast, is to get people outside and enjoy it on their terms. I've heard the term hike your own hike, or hang your own hang when it comes to hammocking. This is the thing. This is your outside. Get out there and enjoy it. So back to this book by Andrew Skurka. I found it fascinating, and one of the things that he brings up in there is types of fun. And he breaks it down into 3 categories. You've got type 1, 2, and 3. And type 1 is fun that is fun to do and also fun to talk about later. Type 2 is not fun to do, but it's fun to talk about later. And type 3 is not fun to do or talk about. This morning, absolutely fun. Happy to talk about it now.
Yeah, that was a good, easy hike.
And that's the goal, is to typically have those type 1 fun activities. But you occasionally have those type 2. I know we could reminisce for hours about certain times that we went out and done things that weren't necessarily fun at the moment, but they make really good stories after the fact.
And I have to say, I really like the type 2 trips, because that means it was challenging. To me, that's what it means.
I totally agree. Even though I'm perfectly happy just sitting on a riverbank, there is something exciting about telling people that you went and climbed to the top of Rocky Top. Yeah. I remember taking 1,000 pictures while we were sitting up there on our first AT hike and thinking, I'm sitting on top of a Rocky Top. Yeah. And this is not something that you can drive up to. You can't even gently stroll up to it. You earn that seat. You earn that picture and that view.
You do. And I do like those trips. And our first AT hike was a section hike through the Smoky Mountains. And I mean, it was a misery. I would say
I agree. There was some type 3 moments.
Yeah, it was a tough trip. 1, because it was our first through hike on the AT. 2, we were not prepared in the way we should have been. But anyway, it's a great trip. And I do like the type 2, because to me that means I was challenged, and I like to be challenged. This morning in the neighborhood, on the trails in our neighborhood, I don't expect to be challenged and that's a type 1, and that's easy and fun. But, for those big trips that you plan for, I want them to be a type 2. I want to go, oh my gosh, this pushed me, challenged me. I'm growing here. Oh, these are great stories. Now, the kind of trips that I don't like to have, but Gary, you do plan them for us with some frequency.
It's never intentional. I never plan type 3 fun.
I've actually started asking rangers on some of these trips when we're starting to go, okay, you see the packs, you see what we're planning. Is this at all feasible? Of course, that didn't work in Shenandoah because the guy looked at me and said, well, it'll be tough, but you can do it. And he lied. He
didn't lie. It was tough, and you did it.
And we did it, but just barely. Only because there was too much fog for me to call a chopper to rescue me. But so type 3, I don't want to ever have. But let's be honest, if you go out in the woods or outdoors for any sort of activity with any regularity, you're going to encounter a type 3 trip from time to time.
I totally agree. I'm never going to plan to have type 3 fun, but it is always a potential. That's why you can't research too much for your trip. You can't prepare too much for your trip. And honestly, if I had had Andrew's book before we did that trip, we would have had less type 3 fun. There would have probably been some type 3s, but it wouldn't have been as much. I know that very first day, when the sun fell and we still were not at our campsite, I was definitely having some type 3 moments. I remember laying on my back, staring into the abyss, thinking, what the hell have I done? And if you had not been there, if I had been alone, I would have probably just camped right there. And by camping, I mean, I would have just fell asleep on the ground and woke up the next morning.
Well, this was the Appalachian Trail. And I keep counting off my points, but there are so many points. You're not allowed to camp on the Appalachian Trail in the Smokies, except in a shelter. So we weren't at the shelter yet because the shelters that would have been reasonable for the hike we were doing that day were booked. So we had to book them less, and you have to make reservations in advance. So we had to book one that we were very optimistically thinking wouldn't be a big deal for us, but turned out to be a really big deal. And Gary was laying down on a trail that literally hugged the edge of the mountain. So you couldn't camp there because you would literally roll off to your death in the night.
It's not
allowed.
These mountains, I'm a mountain person, but this mountain was so steep on both sides, I could literally touch both sides of the mountain just by laying there and reaching my arms out. It was not fun. The biggest thing that I learned on there is packing smarter, packing lighter. We took so many things that we did not need to take. No. This was our first real long distance hike, and my God, I was ready to throw half of my stuff out of my pack over the mountain, and got back and started reading Andrew's book. And that was one of the things that he started driving home, is really think about what you've got. And if I were to give anybody any advice, I would say go on an easy overnighter first and foremost, maybe a double nighter, whatever it is that you want to do. But when you come back, lay everything out that you took. And if you didn't use it, set it off to the side. And if you go out again, don't take that, because you probably didn't need it to begin with. The only exception to that rule is your first aid kit. Always take your first aid kit and hope that you don't need to use it. But otherwise, if you took a giant can of bug spray, think about that. Did you really need that giant can of bug spray, or could you have gotten by with a smaller one? Or maybe did you really even need it at all? These luxury items that some people take, like a full thing of toothpaste. Yes, you want to brush your teeth while you're out there. Everybody wants a nice fresh breath, but it would be nice to not have that gigantic thing of toothpaste eating up space in your pack.
Yeah, I do think, though, it's personal. So I think, to me, bug spray is not a luxury. Bugs love me.
But we should have taken a smaller one.
We should have taken a smaller one. But that's some of the impetus for this podcast too, because we went into this hike thinking, oh, we can do this. We're prepared. We know what we're doing. And we were over prepared. We had too much stuff. And on a long hike and a hike that's challenging, every ounce starts weighing on you. And my pack wasn't quite right. We learned so much on that trip. And I think it informs how we go forward now. I want to know how much everything weighs. I had a stainless steel water bottle that I took with me everywhere. And I'm like, it's going with me on the AT because I'm going to want it. And there was a point where I'm like, why am I carrying a stainless steel water bottle? It was madness. And it's never gone on a trip since. But you learn a lot of things out in the field by trial and error. But one of the most important lessons I learned on that trip was do not overpack. Do not.
Without a doubt.
However, be prepared for any kind of weather.
Yes. Particularly in this location of the AT, it's a temperate rainforest. So it rained a lot while we were there.
Heavy rain.
We definitely got wet. Be prepared to get wet and be prepared to deal with that, from just a mental standpoint and also, too, from a safety standpoint. You don't want to get there and get hypothermia, so you need a change of clothes. But when it comes to packing, do you need 3, 4, 5 changes of clothes, or do you just need 1 or 2? Because I'm going to go ahead and tell you, when you go on long distance hikes, you're going to stink. Go ahead and accept the fact that you're going to get wet, you're going to get dirty, you're going to stink, and that's just the reality of it. So having changes of clothes is one thing, but honestly, I never take more than 2 changes of clothes. I take extra socks. I'll probably have 3 or 4 pairs of socks with me just because I want to have clean, dry feet at all times so I don't run into any problems. But, really think about this. I know you always pack pajamas for bedtime. I don't. I change into clean clothes so that I can sleep, but then I hike in them the next day.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are plenty of backpackers going, pajamas, what in the world? But I like to have those gross hiking clothes off, and I like to have something else on that feels better, and then I can put gross hiking clothes back on the next day. I did stop packing, a fresh outfit for every single day because that became ridiculous and too heavy. But one thing that is smart to pack, and this is another learn to the hard way, which I think is probably all of our outdoor information.
Yeah, you'll never forget a hard lesson.
Yeah, is to pack an extra set of dry, clean clothes in your car.
Oh my gosh,
and
yes.
shoes, and leave them in the car. We went on a trip one time to Croatan, and Gary confused the weather cast. He thought we were going to have some rain. We did have some rain. It was a tropical depression, which is torrential sideways rain. Yeah. So we were hiking out once we realized on our last day how bad this was going to be. We're hiking out. It was probably 3 or 4 miles. It wasn't that bad to the car. But in tropical depression rain, it was a lot.
Oh, it was bad.
And the rain gear wasn't enough to keep us wet, to keep us dry. And we were soaked through to the skin and cold. And when we got to the car, Gary had packed an extra set of clothes. I'd forgotten about it. So I was just wet.
And cold.
And cold.
Even though we're in the South, it was during the summer, but, you got cold.
Yeah. We drove for probably 2 hours with the heat just blasting so I could dry off. It was, a real intense situation. So anyway, not deadly. We weren't at risk of hypothermia or anything like that, which is fortunate. If we'd been further out, we may have been more at risk.
Well, that brings up a really good point, because we had the luxury of knowing that when the storm hit, all we needed to do was get out of there. We had 3 to 4 miles to get back to the car, and we were out of there. What if we weren't? What if we were back on the top of some mountain 20 miles from the car, or, farther? That could have really been a bad situation. So learning the hard way is you'll never forget that. But take it from us, learn from our stupid mistakes, and you'll have a much better time outdoors.
Absolutely. And learn from the other campers and hikers you encounter. We have encountered some great people and learned some terrific things from them, great ideas.
I couldn't agree more. I remember on the top of the mountain last night on the AT, our first AT hike, we're in the Smoky Mountains and it's been raining. We come into this camp and there's an old fella there. It's dinner time. I'm pulling out this awesome MSR Whisper Light stove that I've been dying to get. I've got this huge bottle of fuel, and he's over there setting up a little piece of aluminum foil with a pop can stove that he's made. He squirts a little bit of alcohol fuel in there, and he's got his stuff cooked long before I'm even boiling water. And I went over and talked to him, and he started literally holding the different pieces of gear that I had to cook with, and then he hands me his, and I mean, we're talking ounces, just a few ounces. I came home and immediately started building these different pop can stoves, penny stoves, cat can stoves. I had stoves laying all over the house after that trip, and it taught me a big lesson. You don't need that. I still have the stove. It's a great stove, but it's great for car camping or other types of glamping when you've got a different type of conveyance to carry that type of gear with you.
Yeah, not on your back. He was a wealth of information, and
Yes.
really, really terrific. We learned a lot from him. But that's what's great about being outdoors, is that there are a lot of terrific people who really want to help you and want to share ideas. So definitely meet the people that are in the shelters, or at a picnic site or at a campsite, because it's you make some great relationships and you learn so much.
All right, so I'm going to brag for a second. I have tried for years, ever since I was a kid, to figure out how to make fire in a primitive way. I have no problem building a fire if I've got a lighter or some type of a ferro rod or some way to get a nice spark and some good dry tinder to be able to fire it up with. But I've never been able to just rub sticks together and make fire. I finally did it. Did you know that I made fire?
I think that you have told me 500 million times, plus you made me videotape you the second time. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm aware.
I might be a little bit proud. This was something that I've been trying for so long. And the first time that I did it, I was sitting on the back porch, pulling the stuff together. I'd been watching the David West channel on YouTube, and he was like, hey, just make sure that you check off X, Y, and Z. Give it another try. And so I did. And lo and behold, I made fire. Not a single person saw it. I didn't video any of it until I finally had an ember, because I simply didn't think I was going to succeed. But I did. So I videoed that part, came in, told you, you didn't seem as excited as I wanted you to. So I forced you to come and video.
Let's set the stage. I am training for a half marathon with some friends. So we had just done a 6-mile run. From my 6-mile run, I'd gone straight to the grocery store, and I had just walked into the house from the run and the grocery store. And the first words I hear are, I made fire. So yeah, it was like, all right, that's great. Can you please carry some groceries in?
All right. So after we carried groceries in, got everything put away, had you come out and video me, and I actually made the fire happen. This was just, to me, mind-altering, life-altering. I was so stinking happy. I posted it on Facebook and tagged some friends, because this was just the coolest thing I've ever done, outside of marrying you.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm glad that marrying me was a bigger achievement than making fire with a stick. But
hey, it was a big deal.
I know you're super excited, and I'm excited for you. I don't quite understand it, because I think matches, but
hey, I get it.
I get that it means a lot to you.
So it can't all be about me. Tell me something that you're really excited or loving right now.
I'm not loving it, but I'm excited about it, and that's the half marathon we're training for. I was the kid who, in gym class didn't want to participate ever, and didn't start running until I was around 39. And I've run on and off since then, but I've never run a half marathon. And some of my friends, I don't know why we got this idea or how, but we decided we were going to run a half marathon. We decided with just 12 weeks of training time to go. And so we're not quite physically where we need to be to do this, but we're training really hard. And it's a lot of fun to train with this group of ladies. It's hard work. I hurt almost everywhere, but it's a lot of fun.
Yes. I've seen you come home soaked in sweat, in pain, but I get it. I am so excited for you to do this. I know I am not going to be running this race. I have no desire to do a marathon. I've ran some foot races before, but nothing more than a 5K, and I'm comfortable with that. Been there, done it. I look at this like you do, me hanging out in my hammock or going fishing. It's just not my cup of tea, but I'm so excited for you and happy to see you living this out.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And just to clarify, it's a half. We're only doing we're
half
only
marathon.
Doing 13.1.
Yeah, only 13.1.
Only 13.1.
Yeah.
We've got to get to 13.1.
All right, well, I'm not as excited now, but
you're half as excited.
I'm half as excited as I was earlier. So I'm just curious. We went hiking this morning, and you mentioned that, it's around the house. Mm-hmm. It's in our neighborhood. We know what to expect. It's not something out of the ordinary for us to do. Mm-hmm. But even in those situations, there are certain things that you're always going to have on you. A lot of people would refer to this as your everyday carry. When it comes to this, whether you're going on a 50-mile AT hike or you're just walking around the neighborhood, what do you always have on you?
We've talked about this before because I don't really carry much. I don't even carry a purse. I don't like to carry stuff. So if I have to have something on me, it will be my phone. To me, that's the most important tool I can have because I can call for help. I have a sense of security with my phone. So I would say my phone is my absolute must-have.
Now, I'll admit, I definitely always have my phone on me. I feel lost if I don't have it, but it is not what I would call my everyday carry, even though I always do have it on me. If I were told you can only pick up one thing and walk out of the house with it before you go on this hike, it would be my knife. I've got a Swiss Army knife that I carry. I've had it for close to 30 years. And whether it's that knife or another one of my mini knives, I always have a knife on me. I feel like it's just required to have some type of a knife with you, not because I want to cut something, but because I want a tool with me. And that's another advantage of the Swiss Army knife. It's got some tools on it. I honestly don't use everything on it. There's a hook on there that you can use to carry things with. Never use that for that use. The awl on it, I've used it a couple times, but I've never used it to sew any material together or anything like that. But I love having my Swiss Army knife. I carry it every day, whether I'm at work, working on a piece of electronic equipment, or whether I'm out in the woods, whittling on a stick or something. I've always got my knife on me.
Yeah. And I'm always grateful that you have the knife because I've often said, hey, do you have your knife? Can you do this? But, it's not something that I carry.
Well, that does it for this podcast. Thanks for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. For show notes and pics and other cool things, check out our website, InsideTheOutside.com.
You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Look for the handle Inside the Outside Show.
And if you have show ideas or just want to chat, you can email us at InsideTheOutsideShow@gmail.com.
Until the next time, we hope to see you outside.